Good morning, everyone. It's Steve and Doris Colgate doing our round 2 of Dockside Chats with Steve and Doris, because I'm joining him now.
Yep.
So we're talking lately about the flotilla cruises we did, and one of the ones that is most memorable to us was going to cruise in Yugoslavia. Now, most of you know that that is now Serbia and Croatia. But when we did it, it was still Yugoslavia. The country had not split. And I don't know if we were the first Americans there, but it is possible. So how did this start out, Steve?
Well, it was in 1989. And,
September.
In September, and we had 4 Cabos, what was the boats?
Cabo, they were Oceanus 43s from a company, well, it was a company called Cabos, K-A-V-O-S, and they were all named KISS something. So ours was KISS 64 or 54, and another was KISS 56. The K was probably for Cabos, but I don't know what the rest was.
Yeah, well, it was probably Yugoslav. So, who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway, one of the interesting things on this particular cruise, we had a graduate who was a librarian, a young gal, and she had signed up her father and herself for this trip. Her father was getting along in age. I think he was around in his late 60s back then. That was old, and about just the week before the cruise was we were going to fly over to Yugoslavia, she called up and said my father feels a little dizzy and is not. We have to beg off this cruise, and we said, well, that's a real shame. Then the day before we were going to fly over to Yugoslavia, she called back and said, my father's coming, and we're coming. And I said, what happened? She said, well, he did a somersault, and when he did that somersault, he wasn't dizzy, he was fine. She says, I'm going. And he was a delightful guy, and at the end of this cruise, she turned to me and she said, Steve, you gave me my father back. This was marvelous, you know? So it was so nice.
Yeah, so on this cruise, we saw a country that was pretty much in disrepair. And wherever we went, we started in Trogir, which is pretty civilized, a beautiful marina. I mean, it was really nice there. But you couldn't really go into just any restaurant you wanted to or any bar you wanted to. I remember a bar in Trogir where when we went in, a very smoky place, suddenly all conversation stopped. Steve thinks it was the Dubrovnik. We may have gone to 2. Who knows? But it was because there were people who were fighting the communist regime, and so and they were, radicals on one side or the other, and anybody that didn't look like part of them, which was us, we were not part of them, was a threat. So when we cruised, we went to beautiful harbors that were national parks. We went to small little villages, and we ate out most of the time, but the menus were all the same, weren't they? So
they were government issued menus, and they were about 100 pages, and they had on the left you had what you were supposedly eating or ordering, and then there was one column for a price for every item in that 100 pages, and there's another column where it's penciled in the same price, but that column means they have that item. And out of 100 pages, they might have 4 or 5 items.
Yeah, and it wasn't. The variety was pretty bad. It was a meat, a potato, but it was just being in the countryside and walking around, and there were derelict old cars in yards, and people were pretty poor. But then we got to Dubrovnik, so we went from Trogir to Dubrovnik and then back. And we saw a lot of incredible ruins that had not been destroyed by any war. And I know many people have been to Dubrovnik now. It looked the same then, in '89. It is an amazing, truly an amazing looking place. So then coming back, on the way back, we had a little oops with our boat, didn't we?
Yeah, well, oil ran out. I mean,
Yeah.
it had a problem, and oil was everywhere, and so we towed back to. But that was
That was in Yugoslavia.
okay,
It was in Yugoslavia.
and that was to Dubrovnik, wasn't it? I think
No,
to the big,
no, we were
big
on
marina.
we were on our way back actually to Trogir, and went into the marina. But in order to tow us, Steve got on a boat that was working. I stayed on our boat and steered, and we were rafted together.
Tugboat style, sort of a quarter of the boat that was pulling the other one. Instead of towing back here, we just did it on the quarter of this boat, and it worked very well for maneuvering around. So that's one of the reasons I did it, so that when we got there, we might be able to back in.
Yes, but the oops was backing in, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
oops was backing in, because on that side, all that drag on that side just pulled me that way, even though I was using prop walk to go the other way. So we had to separate, and we made it.
We made it in. We drifted in. Everything
And
was
then they
fine.
had a mechanic, and they got it done,
Yeah.
got it fixed.
So what Steve's holding is the newsletter that we wrote every quarter that was called On Offshore, and this is a picture of the Adriatic. And of course everything was black and white in those days. But if I can show you the picture of the gentleman, see that picture there? That's the guy who did the somersault, and he was on our boat. And so, you know, these are just incredible adventures, and Steve and I did lead about 100 of them before we turned them over to staff and others who would be able to lead them while we went off and did things like run the company instead of play. But anyway, so that's a little bit of a story about the very first cruise in Yugoslavia, and it was the very first bareboat cruise that anyone from the U.S., I think, had done there. And the moorings had us do a presentation because they were doing a relationship with Cabos Yachts, and they wanted to know how to sell it. So there we were, doing it first again, and we'll be back with another later on. Bye-bye.